Welcome to the Layer by Layer Poetic Features for Psalm 67, a psalm which we remember by the phrase, "Praise from the whole earth." Our goal is to reveal the distinctive beauty and power of the original Hebrew text of Psalm 67 as the next best thing to knowing Hebrew yourself. The three poetic features are called Surprise, Center and Periphery, and What on Earth? Surprise, our first feature. The word Selah is one of the mysteries of Hebrew poetry. Nobody knows exactly what it means. It usually comes at a point of transition. It might mean that there is a musical break, or it might mark another kind of transition. Verses 2 and 3 are one sentence, however, so a transition within a single sentence is quite surprising. The connection between verses 2 and 3 reveals the central focus of the psalm. Verse 2 is very similar to the Aaronic or high priestly blessing that God gave to Aaron and his sons through Moses in Numbers 6. The words that are translated in the English as "Be gracious to us," and "May he bless us," and "May he shine," and "his face," all link directly to Numbers 6. The main difference is that in Numbers 6, the priests are declaring the blessing upon you, whereas in Psalm 67, the singers are asking God for a blessing toward us. Verse 3, however, which comes after the Selah, is similar to a different blessing, a blessing that came even earlier in the history of Israel. The blessing this verse sounds like is the Abrahamic blessing, the blessing God gave to Abraham in Genesis 12. The phrases "on earth" and "among all nations" in the context of blessing sound similar to this important text in Genesis 12, in which God chose Abraham and promised to make him a great nation, and through him to bless all nations. God restates this promise several times throughout Genesis to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Hebrew words used in Genesis 22:18 and 26:4 match the text of Psalm 67 even more closely. The Selah highlights the sudden shift from the words of the Aaronic blessing in verse 2 to words that are similar to the Abrahamic blessing in verse 3. As a result, the version of the Aaronic blessing in verse 2 starts with a focus on us, that is, Israel. But after the Selah, the blessing suddenly expands to include all the families of the earth. The people of Israel start by asking for blessing for themselves, but they finish by asking for blessing for the whole earth. This raises the question of who belongs in the us. If it is those whom God chooses to bless, then it starts with Israel, but throughout the psalm it becomes all nations. The nations are included in those whom God blesses, rules, and guides. Perhaps it should not have been a surprise, but again and again in Israelite history, that idea, the idea that God blesses, rules, and guides people from all nations, was a surprise. Our second feature is center and periphery. The outer sections, or periphery of the psalm, each have three references to us, that is, to Israel itself. The middle section has 7 references to peoples and none to us. The central word of the whole poem is peoples. Much of the literature in the ancient Near East, the region of the world where Israel was located, places the nation writing the literature at the center and describes other nations as outsiders. In this psalm, however, Israel is literally on the outer edges, on the periphery, and it's the peoples, the other nations, that are in the center. We'll now discuss the details of this feature. In verse 2, there are 3 references to us, shown in red. In verses 7 and 8, there are another 3, also shown in red. By contrast, almost all the references to people groups occur in the middle of the psalm, especially in verses 4 and 6. If we look at verse 5, the central verse on its own, we see that the words for people groups move progressively closer to the beginning of each line, which is the most prominent or highlighted position in a line of Hebrew poetry. The words for people groups move from the last position in the first line, through the middle position in the middle line, to the first and most prominent position in the last line. And in fact, the middle word of the whole poem is amim, peoples, in verse 5b. In ancient Near Eastern thought, as already mentioned, each nation talked about itself as being in the center of the universe, with the other nations around it. It is striking that this poem presents the information in the opposite way. The speakers, the Israelites, are clearly talked about only on the periphery, the outer sections, and the others, the non-Israelite nations, are in the center. As a result, the poetic message is that others, the nations, become the main focus of the psalm, rather than Israel. Israel requests blessing, but not only for Israel. Israel requests blessing so that the nations would be involved. Within the psalm, the nations are to be blessed by coming to know God, recognizing his rule and guidance, and praising him. By doing so, the nations join Israel in receiving blessings from God. Verse 8 concludes the poem by setting us, Israel, alongside all people, the ends of the earth. It clearly shows that both Israel and the nations fear the Lord. Israel has not been rejected, but the nations have been included. They share in a relationship with God that includes blessings. As with the first poetic feature, this would not be a surprise to Abraham, but historically speaking, it would have been a surprise to many Israelites, who at times thought they were God's only people, excluding all the other nations. Our third feature is, what on earth? In this psalm, the word earth, eretz in Hebrew, is used 4 times. There are several possible meanings for earth. It can refer to the people who live on the earth, or to its large size, or to the soil that produces crops, or it can refer to the promised land that God gave to Israel. This psalm is talking about not only the people of the earth, but also everything about the earth as well, its people, its large size, and even its land. In verse 3a, earth occurs in an unusual word order. It is in a prepositional phrase that comes before the direct object, instead of its usual position after the direct object. In this line, earth seems to refer figuratively to the people who live on the earth. It is not clear which people it is referring to. It could mean Israel, or it could mean all nations. Because the words all nations are in the line that is parallel to it, the word earth here probably refers to the nations of the earth. In verse 5c, earth again appears in an unusual word order. Here, it is in a prepositional phrase before the verb, which is striking. Once again, there are 2 possible meanings of this line. Earth could be telling us something about the people of the earth, that is, people who live on the earth. Or it could be describing God's guidance, that is, he guides them on the earth. If it is describing people, then this earth refers to the large number of the peoples God guides. He guides the peoples from across the whole earth. If it is describing God's guidance, then this refers to where God guides them, on the earth, throughout their daily lives. The same word, earth, also means land in Hebrew, so this line could also be referring to God guiding them into the land, that is, the special promised land of Israel. In verse 7a, earth appears in the line that seems to change topic completely from the lines before it. There is more than one possible meaning of the word earth here. This time, it seems to refer to the soil in which crops grow. But at the same time, it can mean the land, area, or property where the crops grow, the whole globe, or once again, the promised land of Israel. In verse 8b, earth is the final word of the psalm. This word, together with the earth that is the first word of Psalm 7, forms an envelope around the final two verses. The earth in verse 8b, however, is clearly talking about the people of the earth. What does all this mean? In the Old Testament, the word eretz, earth or land, often refers to the promised land, the land God promised to give Israel as part of his covenant with them. In this poem, Psalm 67, this word eretz is highlighted in several different ways, more so than any other word. However, it never clearly refers to the promised land in this psalm. Instead of clearly referring to the promised land, the 4 times the word earth is used in this poem work together to expand the idea of the land. This land goes beyond Israel and includes the entire globe and all the people who live on it. In other words, Israel's blessing in the promised land is intended to result in blessing for peoples all over the earth. The final use of the word eretz, the only one that does not have more than one possible meaning, states clearly that this blessing will expand to cover the whole earth. This has been the Poetic Features video for Psalm 67, in which we explore the natively Hebrew poetic nature of the psalm. Our 3 poetic features were, surprise, where the Selah between verses 2 and 3 draws attention to the change between the 2 verses, from a focus on Israel, drawing from the high priestly blessing, to a focus on all nations, drawing on the Abrahamic blessing. The purpose of the blessing to one nation was to end in blessing for all nations. Our second feature was center and periphery. Contrary to cultural expectations, Israel does not appear at the center of the poem in the place of honor. Instead, the nations are placed in the center, and Israel is on the periphery. And our final feature, what on earth? The word earth often refers to the promised land, the land of Israel alone. It is used with many different meanings in Psalm 67, until the final use, in which it clearly means the entire earth. The familiar use for the land of Israel alone is expanded to include the whole earth. Each of these features provides a poetic echo that the blessing for Israel was just the start, the first fruits. The end result was the blessing of all nations, that all might fear and praise the Lord. We have additional videos for Psalm 67. Our overview video provides a single coherent interpretation of the psalm, and our exegetical issues video discusses other scholarly views. All these videos are offered free of charge, thanks to the generosity of our donors. Please visit us at psalms.scriptura.world to learn more. Thank you.